Hi, my name is Paul Kretz and today I want to talk about this lens, the Canon EF 28mm f1.8 USM. It's in my opinion quite underrated lens. It has somewhat mixed reputation. It's quite old, but it's really budget. It's relatively low priced and it's very good for its price, and I'm really satisfied with it. And I'll tell you why I purchased it, what for, what inspired me, and what are the peculiarities of this particular lens, and what is it good for and what is not so good for. So let's start with the history. I just wanted to find the really wide angle lens with a wide maximum aperture, the widest I could have concerning these both parameters. And as you see here in this picture, I'm shooting with 20mm 1.8 Sigma lens. It's a great lens by the way as well. I have a video about that. I'll clip it here to the YouTube card, but you see these walls here are not straight vertical, they are a little bit inclined, angled, and that is because the 20mm is too wide of an angle. I'm just shooting it because it's convenient, it's wide and everything's in frame. But if you want straight lines in your videos and pictures, so to give you the more natural perspective, which may be important, then 28 is probably the widest you can get. Wider than 28, say going to 24mm, it's already gonna be starting to angle your vertical lines in the frame. But 28 just keeps it straight. And by the way, 28 is the equivalent of the most standard smartphone cameras these days. So, of course, there are ultra-wide cameras in smartphones and the telephotos, as they call it at least. But the most standard smartphone cameras are somewhat between 26 and 28mm. So it's the most common that you see on your smartphone when you're taking pictures or videos, is what you're mostly used to. 28 is a really great, wide but natural, and 1.8 on a full-frame camera is really wide aperture. It can give you a lot of out-of-focus backgrounds, also known as bokeh. And you can also shoot in much darker conditions than with the apertures like 2.8 or even darker. So that's great. Now let's go through basic specs of this lens. The production of this lens started in 1995, and Canon actually started autofocusing production, the full-scale autofocusing cameras and lenses, in 1987. So it's 8 years since Canon already had autofocusing systems, and I would call this the second generation actually, because the first ones were with the autofocusing motor called AFD, arc form drive. I actually reviewed some of these lenses like 135mm f2.8 with soft focus, or the so-called trombone lenses 35-105 and 35-135. They both have these AFD motors, and by the way, the old ultra-wide zoom 20-35 2.8 also has this autofocusing motor, and many others. But this lens is actually of the second generation, as I would call it, and that generation includes, besides this lens, the very famous 85 1.8 USM, the maybe even more famous 51.4 USM, and for example 22.8 wide-angle lens. I was considering the latter, but I decided to go with this Sigma 20mm because it is 1.8 instead of 2.8 at Canon's, but here 1.8. And actually they differ slightly in build quality because this 28 1.8 is the same build quality as 85 1.8, which is very good. Nice quality plastics, really damped focusing rings, and very fast and fully internal autofocus. So nothing extends or rotates on the outer edge, while the 51.4 has a much poorer build quality and not damped focusing ring, and as well the front element actually extends and collapses back, so you may damage if you touch it. It's not so reliable, the moisture and dust can get into it, but this 28 1.8 is much better in these regards. I actually viewed a lot of reviews of this lens before buying it, but the last one that actually convinced me was the Steve Heiss, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, His review actually convinced me, and he said that despite the fact that this is not the sharpest lens wide open, it has really nice build quality, very quiet and fast autofocus, and very maybe strange, weird, but specific bokeh look. The autofocus backgrounds and foregrounds look specifically and originally. And it all turned out true, except that the sharpness actually turned out better, in my experience, than Steve showed us and told us. So that was a nice surprise when I picked this up from the delivery. I was nicely surprised that it's sharper than I expected. It is also very compact and light, as you see. It's smaller than my hand actually, and here you see it on a 5D Mark III camera, which is a rather big camera by itself, and the lens is really compact on this. If you see it now, let's refocus. Yeah, it's really compact. It's also has the filter here, so it's a little bit longer on this side. Now, what I'm aiming here, right? And so, as you see, it's really compact if you use these smaller tripods. This is a great Ulanzi Chinese tripod, metallic and very sturdy. You see it's never falling, and the ball head is so strong here that such a huge camera like 5D Mark III, you can easily hold like this, and the ball head's gonna hold, it's not gonna fall. So it's really strong, small tripod, and this lens is really ideal for such situations. It's not gonna, bend over or fall or something. Now, what's next? Starting from 1995, this lens is produced, and I believe it's still in production up to this day, because I found it on Canon's official website. So this is quite an still actual lens, and there is nothing similar from, the full equivalent, at least in Canon's world. Maybe some third-party manufacturers have something like it. Tell me in comments if you know. But Canon doesn't have anything like that. That's why it's still on the website. But there are rumors that on the RF mount, the contemporary full frame and of course crop sensors as well, mount, Canon is gonna put out 28, maybe even 1.4 lens. But until it comes out, this is still the actual 28 wide aperture lens. It has the angle of view of 75 degrees, which is quite wide, as I told you, and it's nice. And it has 7 aperture blades, which is no small. This vintage camera has only 4 aperture blades, and some contemporary cameras have 9 or even more. So it gives you more rounded bokeh, especially in the pronounced points of light. When you stop down the aperture, with the wide open aperture, it doesn't matter, it's just circular, it's rounded. So bokeh is gonna be circular. But when you close down the aperture, if you don't wanna have these weird shapes, the more aperture blades, the better. So 7, it's the middle number, it's okay. Now it weighs only 320 grams. Actually, it's a little bit weighty comparing to its size, but overall, in general, it's really light lens. It's not weighty at all. But due to its maximum aperture of 1.8 and a lot of big glass here, you see, that's a lot of glass. It's not heavy for full-frame cameras, but for its size, it's considerable. Now, let's go through its parameters one by one. Let me just fix this hole with 51.8. It has the metallic bayonet, which is mount, which is really good. And the rear element actually moves inside of the barrel. Yeah, it moves back and forth, but unlike many of the lenses, it doesn't leave any space for anything to fall inside the lens. So yes, it's moving back and forth, but there is no space for getting some big items, like, a fly. Some lenses have such a big room there that a fly can get in, or ant or something like that. Well, this rear element is not fixed, it moves, but it leaves no space for anything to fall inside the lens, so this is good. And electronic contacts, metallic mount. It has the auto and manual focusing switch here, just your regular button, but it's really small, and I believe it's not going to be convenient to use it, say, in the winter with the gloves. It's really small, and with the gloves you will it's not going to be so sensible in these regards. It has the focusing distance screen, and it has a little red dot marking for infrared focusing, by the way. And it has the smallest, the minimum focusing distance as 25 centimeters, which is really close. It's not true macro, but it's really close. And considering 1.8 aperture, you can have a lot of out of focus background, a lot of bokeh. So 25 centimeters is close enough for getting some artistic shots. The focusing ring, as I've told you, really well damped, very smooth. So manual focusing is not a problem. It's silky smooth, very nice. The autofocus on this lens is actually really fast, really quiet, and really precise. So it's the best that you can have. The traditional best Canon's ultrasonic autofocusing system. And how it works, how fast and how silent it works, I already showed you in YouTube Shorts. So go to my YouTube Shorts and find the video about this lens there, and where I show it. And it is so quiet that you can actually use it with the shotgun mic on top of your camera. So the noise from this lens will barely be picked up by the shotgun mic. But of course, it's always better to use, like I do, the lavalier microphone or some radio system, wireless system will get rid of this problem altogether. But with this lens, unlike many others, you can really use shotgun mic on top of the camera. The front element is quite big. Let me unscrew the filter here. It's big, but it is beautiful, and you see inside of it a somewhat rectangular shape, somewhat rectangular frame. And this is considered to get rid of some lens flares with the direct light into the lens. So this weird rectangular frame must protect you to somewhat degree of the direct light and the flares. And it has the lens filter thread of 58 millimeters, which is not big, and so the filters are gonna get cheap. By the way, I used this lens with the filter of 82 millimeters. I bought my filter systems and these circular polarizing diffusing filters for this lens with which we are shooting right now, Sigma 28 1.8, and it has 82 millimeters thread, so really big. But using stepping rings, 4 or 5 of them, so that's a lot. And still having like this accordion here, you know, with this huge filter and a lot of stepping rings. With this 58 millimeters thread, it is not giving any vignetting. So this 75 degrees angle of view is actually enough for this lot of stepping rings and a huge filter in front of it not to give any vignetting. So you can use any filters, big filters with stepping rings, with this 58 filter thread, which is very nice. Now, of course, it has the hood. I have a third-party cheap hood here, EW632. That is what it's called. It's third-party, but it fits really well, and it protects you from the direct, you know, access to the lens, from the drops of water, from the snow, or from anything else, and of course from the upper light, direct light, side light. To somewhat extent, it protects you from that. But for me, it is mostly protection from the direct impact of something into the big front glass element. So, and it's of course reversible. You can mount it reversed and have it on your lens without any problems. Very nice as well. Now let's get closer and see what's the most interesting. And this is of course the optical quality. And what about the sharpness and different kinds of aberrations? As I've told you previously, I was pleasantly surprised with the sharpness. To my eyes, you know, sharpness is quite subjective, but to my eyes, these lenses at 1.8, at least at my 26 megapixel 6D Mark II, the sharpness is quite decent at 1.8 in the center of the frame. Yeah, it's getting softer and softer to the corners, but at 1.8, at least say the half of the frame, if you go from the center to the outer edges, at least half of the frame is going to be decently sharp. So for some artistic shots, it's more than enough. And of course, for video, it's not a problem at all. So the sharpness is rather good at 1.8. it's decent at least. And at 2.8 it's razor sharp in the middle of the frame, and it's much better on the outer edges. And from f4 to f10, f11, in this range, of course, the lens is very sharp from corner to corner, just like pretty much every lens, you know. The sweet spot is basically from f4 to f8. There is the most sharpness and the less aberrations in any lens with these apertures. So it's quite possible to get a nice artistic sharp shots at 1.8, and if you want sharper edges, just stop the aperture down. Now, about the other types of aberrations, it gives slight distortion, very slight distortion, as I've told you as well. It's the most natural perspective, so this distortion is really low, and it is also corrected and compensated by Canon internally, because this lens actually is capable of being corrected with the in-camera corrections in contemporary Canon cameras, which correct distortion, chromatic aberrations, diffraction, and vignetting. So the distortion is not very prominent, and it also can be easily corrected. Now, the chromatic aberrations, yes, they present and at 1.8 in the edges mostly. The center is okay, and they get less and less with the stopping down of the aperture, and as well the corrections are available for this lens, so chromatic aberrations are also corrected. What else? Vignetting. There is some visible vignetting at 1.8, but it's quite mild and it's quite even, it's quite gradual, so that you don't really see it much in your regular pictures. Of course, if you shoot the white wall, you'll see the darker corners, but in regular pictures it's not a problem at all. And as well, again, it is all corrected in post or right in camera internally with the native corrections. But the worst thing that may be for someone who likes astrophotography or nighttime landscapes is the Coma. So this is when your pointy, bright lights on the edges of the frame literally turn to comas. They get smudged. They are not like circular, not points of light, but like smudged lines of light at wide apertures. When you stop down the aperture, this corrects. And if you stop down severely to f8, of course your pointy lights gonna stay pointy and give some sun stars. But for astrophotography or some other kinds of nighttime photography, you really want to shoot at wide aperture with sharp and corners without comas. This is not about this lens, so not very good in this regards. And now the bokeh. 1.8, even at 28 millimeters, can give you a lot of bokeh, especially if you shoot close up. So the less focusing distance, the more bokeh you have. But even at relative distance like this, like I'm shooting on, you know, maybe at about straight arm or a little more than that, the 1.8 and full frame really gives you a lot of autofocusing background still. And the quality of this background is questionable. I personally really like it because it gives you somewhat of a vintage sense. It's a little bit smudged, like the painting with the paint on a, you know, wall, smudged with your finger, you know, if you took it over and, you know, something like that, like you painted it with paint. It's not like contemporary, standard, accurate, you know, smooth bokehs. This lens has a little bit weird bokeh, but it's quite original, it's quite artistic, and it's quite special. So I really like it, but some of you who get acquainted and got used to contemporary smooth bokehs, you may not like it. So just watch the examples of the pictures and videos and make up your mind. But I personally really like this bokeh, and I'm actually a fan of old vintage lenses with their specific look. And this is quite, despite it's just 1995, it's not so old to compare it to vintage lenses from 70s, 80s, 60s and stuff. But it still has quite a vintage look. And so now let's get to conclusions. What is good for and what is not so good for? Well, it's really good for artistic purposes, for videos. It is light, budget, it's compact, small, fast and quite wide angle. So it's easy to take it, you know, bring it into your pocket on a small tripod, nice camera, and very convenient for video, for interviews, for shooting outside. It's very good for street photography. Wide aperture, wide angle, small, not so conspicuous, so using small camera like RP, Canon R, or something like that, or even 6D Mark II, with which we are shooting right now. It's not gonna draw a lot of attention for street photography. It's small and compact, and quite sharp for street photography, and wide aperture is good. And it's nice for portraits. If you are ready to shoot wide angle portraits, it's nice as well. It gives you a lot of very special autofocusing backgrounds. So for all of this, for artistic purposes, this is good. But if you want technical quality for, say, architectural photography, astrophotography, interiors, or something like that, or professional commercial photography, when you need all the picture quality that you need, this is not so good. It's not sharp from edge to edge, or otherwise you need to shut down the aperture a lot. So doesn't have that perfect commercial picture quality unless stopped down. But for artistic purposes, with wide angle and wide aperture, this is good. This is really cheap and very nice, very lovely lens. I really love it, and I take it. It's basically my, standard lens on my camera when I'm going out these days, because I can shoot photos with it. I can shoot portraits. I can shoot something in the cafe with, say, with family or something. Shooting events like reportage or something like that. And I can as well shoot something like macro, because it has really low minimum focusing distance. And I can also shoot videos, like I told you. Just grab my little tripod, put it on the table in front of me and shoot videos. So a very nice lens for its price, and I really dig it. And I showed you a lot of pictures in this video, so you can make up your mind. And if you like this video, of course, press like and subscribe to this channel. And please tell me in comments if you use this lens, if you ever used it, and what's your experience, what you found out, and what I maybe even forgot. Just correct me and add something to what I've said. Paul Kretz was here with you, and I'll see you in the next videos. Or maybe not. It's up to you. I'm out.